Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. You picture Katniss, bow drawn, arrow aimed, the face of open defiance. And then you picture Peeta, hands dusted in flour. A loaf of bread, the boy who decorates cakes. At face value, it feels obvious who's more dangerous to a brutal regime that survives on fear: the hunter with a weapon, or the baker with a crush. But here's the real question. If Katniss is the one shooting at the Capitol, why do they spend so much more effort breaking Peeta's mind instead of just stopping her arrows? You think back to the 74th Hunger Games. Katniss enters the arena ready to do one thing: survive. Peeta walks in and does something no other tribute dares to do. Before the games even start, he goes on live television and quietly attacks the entire premise of the arena. He says he wants to show the Capitol they don't own him. He refuses to be a piece in their games. So why is that simple statement so threatening that it echoes through every book afterwards? Everyone calls Katniss the Mockingjay, the symbol, the spark. But the long-term threat to the Capitol might actually be the boy who almost toppled them on live TV without firing a single shot. That part matters because symbols can be replaced. Stories are harder to kill. Snow fears Katniss's image, but he fears Peeta's words. And he's right to. Here's the twist. The fandom loves to debate who would win in a fight, Katniss or Peeta, bow versus brute force, forest skills versus frosting skills. But that's the wrong matchup. The real question is, who could actually dismantle a dictatorship more effectively? An instinctive rebel who reacts, or a strategic storyteller who rewrites the narrative holding the whole system together? This is where we talk about Peeta as the only tribute who openly challenges the game's narrative before the bloodbath even begins. His love confession doesn't just make good television, it forces the game makers to rewrite the rules of their own show. Two victors from the same district, a public promise of hope that the Capitol never meant to offer. And when he and Katniss raise those berries, he turns that hope into a weapon, daring the system to either kill its star-crossed lovers or expose the games as fake. There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta keeps doing this. On the victory tour, with the fake pregnancy, with every carefully chosen word, he keeps bending the narrative until the Capitol's control starts to crack. And the response tells you everything. Katniss gets threats. Peeta gets hijacked. They don't just punish him, they try to reprogram his brain. So in this video, we're going to cover how Peeta's philosophy, charisma, and psychological warfare make him the Capitol's true worst nightmare, and why, in the long game, the soft-spoken boy with the bread might be more dangerous than the Mockingjay herself. Why Peeta versus Katniss actually decides the fate of Panem. If you strip away the ships, the memes, the Team Peeta versus Team Gale debates, you're left with a much colder question. Which tribute is more dangerous to the games themselves? Because at face value, fandom arguments tend to orbit combat skills, chemistry, who you'd rather have in the woods with you. But here's the real question. Inside Panem, inside Snow's office, the stakes aren't romantic. The stakes are structural. Whose existence does more damage to the Capitol's entire system of control? This is where we talk about cause and effect. If Katniss dies in the 74th Games the way the script expects, a brave doomed girl from a poor district, what actually happens? You still get a tragic story, you still get a victorious career. The Capitol can spin that forever. Without Peeta's on-air confession, without the star-crossed lover's narrative, there is no rule change, no double victory, no berry stunt. The rebellion never crystallizes around a single impossible moment where two tributes almost choose each other over the games. That part matters because Peeta is the one who weaponizes narrative. He's the only tribute who walks into Caesar Flickerman's interview and openly challenges the premise of the games by saying, "I want to die as myself." Katniss is the oxygen on camera. Remove him, and the Capitol never has to publicly bend its own rules to accommodate a love story it accidentally sold to the districts. Now flip it. What if Katniss survives, but Peeta is removed from the board early? The rebellion keeps a hunter, a symbol, a girl on fire, but it loses its most effective propaganda weapon. Who smooths out Katniss's rough edges on the victory tour? Who turns a scripted apology into a threat by dropping the fake pregnancy and the "we just want to live" plea? Over and over, Peeta's words make the crowd cry, make peacekeepers nervous, make Snow clench his glass a little tighter. There is a lot to uncover here, because the pattern is consistent. Snow fears Katniss's symbol, but he fears Peeta's speeches. Plutarch and Coin both treat Peeta as a volatile asset, not just a sentimental attachment. Why do Finnick, Johanna, Beatty, and the others prioritize saving Peeta over Katniss in the Quarter Quell? Why does the Capitol risk hijacking him instead of just killing him quietly? Why does Coin later parade his recovery on camera as proof of District 13's mercy and power? Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. The victory tour, the Quarter Quell, the war, those are just sequels. Katniss's post-victory danger is visible. The Mockingjay suit, the bow, the song. Peeta's danger is slower, more corrosive. Every interview he survives is another chance to redefine what victor means, to turn winning from a promise of safety into a question about the Capitol's morality. So when you zoom out, the real battle for Panem isn't just fought in arenas. It's fought in living rooms, on screens, in that tiny pause before the audience decides who to believe. And Peeta? He turns that pause into a weapon. But how does a baker's son from District 12 learn to do that? And why does even a broken, hijacked Peeta still threaten every leader who tries to use him? That's where we're going next. Our lens today, Peeta as weaponized storyteller, not side love interest. So when we say Peeta turns that pause into a weapon, what are we actually claiming? Because here's the real question. If Katniss is the Mockingjay, the visible spark of rebellion, why does Snow keep acting like the real threat might be the boy with the bread who can't win a fight against Cato? This is where we talk about what dangerous means in Panem. Not body count, not kill streak. Danger in a totalitarian system is measured in how much you can destabilize its control over fear, hope, and the story everyone thinks they're living in. Katniss breaks arenas. One shatters the physical stage of the games, the other convinces the audience that the entire production is a lie. At face value, Katniss is the obvious rebel. She shoots at the force field, she kills Coin, she becomes the symbol. But Peeta is the oxygen that lets that spark spread. Without someone to explain, reframe, and humanize what she does, Katniss is just another dangerous tribute the Capitol can edit into a cautionary tale. Peeta's danger is that he keeps refusing the role they hand him, and, in doing so, forces everyone else to see the cracks. His whole philosophy is summed up in one line: "I want to show them that they don't own me." It sounds small, almost personal, right? But that part matters, because the games only work if tributes believe they are owned. by their district, by the capital, by the cameras. Survival usually means accepting the script. Play the monster, play the victim, play the grateful victor. Peeta's promise to himself is a direct attack on that psychological foundation. He's not just trying to live, he's trying to stay himself in a place designed to erase you. So we're going to cover Peeta as a victor of narrative rather than a victor of combat. In the first games, he's the only tribute who openly challenges the Capitol's story in his interview, turning a standard Q&A into a live romance arc that forces the game makers to rewrite the rules. Later, he's the one who names the pregnancy on the victory tour, escalating unrest without firing a single shot. Katniss survives arenas. Peeta makes those arenas mean something different to every living room in Panem. And notice who the rebels prioritize. In Catching Fire, multiple victors agree that Peeta has to live over Katniss. That sounds wrong if you're only counting arrows. It makes perfect sense if you're counting influence. Snow fears Katniss's symbol. He fears Peeta's words. Coin and Plutarch later try to weaponize both, turning Peeta into capital mouthpiece, then recovery symbol, because even broken, hijacked Peeta is still one of the most dangerous pieces on the board. Across all three books and films, that's the pattern we're going to trace. How Peeta's choices force the Capitol, the rebellion, and even Katniss herself to react. So how does this start in the 74th games, when he's just a baker's son on a stage with Caesar Flickerman? Let's go back to that first interview. Game plan for this deep dive, and the wild what if at the end. So we're back on that stage with Caesar Flickerman, but to really track why Peeta is more dangerous than Katniss, we need a game plan. Because there is a lot to uncover here, and if we just followed the explosions and the arrows, we actually miss the sharpest weapon in the arena, his philosophy. First, we're going to cover the clash at the core of their relationship. Peeta's "I don't want to be a piece in their games" versus Katniss's "keep Prim alive at any cost" instinct. At face value, both sound noble, but here's the real question. Which mindset is more destabilizing to a system built on fear? We'll track how Peeta's refusal to let the Capitol define him quietly rewires every choice he makes, from volunteering to die with the berries to refusing to play Coin's version of the games later. Then we move into charisma as a weapon. This is where we talk about Peeta the performer, the boy who turns a pre-games interview into a live rebellion test case. We'll break down the love confession, how it forces the game makers to rewrite the rules mid-arena, and why Snow is suddenly stuck with a narrative he didn't script. Why does one soft-spoken baker's son become the Capitol's darling, and at the same time its biggest PR risk? From there, we zoom in on strategy, arena by arena. In the 74th games, we'll look at his decision to align with the careers, his camouflage, and the way he makes himself useful and invisible at once. In the Quarter Quell, we'll unpack the alliance where victors repeatedly choose Peeta over Katniss, sometimes literally stepping between him and death. That part matters because it tells us how the rebellion's inner circle ranked their assets: the symbol with a bow, or the boy who can turn a sentence into a spark. Running alongside all of that is a meta layer. Book Peeta versus movie Peeta. We'll pause on key interviews, speeches, and those Capitol reaction shots to see whether films soften his danger or amp it up. Why does the camera linger on Snow's face when Peeta speaks? Why does the pregnancy reveal on the victory tour hit differently on screen than on the page? We'll ask how adaptation choices change your sense of who the real threat is. Finally, we'll push this to a wild what if. What if Peeta never confessed his love on that stage? No star-crossed lovers, no Berry Gambit, maybe no Mockingjay. Does the rebellion still ignite, or does Katniss die as another anonymous tribute from a poor district? And we'll close by answering the question underneath all of this. If you woke up in a real dystopia and had to pick one ally, Peeta or Katniss, Which one actually gives you a better chance of changing the system? Keep that in mind as we step into that first interview. Now, welcome to the arena of analysis, channel context, and how we do this. So as that first interview chair swivels toward Peeta, let's zoom out for a second. Because if you're new here, you should know this channel basically lives in the victor's village of analysis. We don't just recap the games, we move in, check the wiring, and ask why the Capitol built the arena that way in the first place. This is where we talk about the machinery underneath the story. We're going to cover world building, the psychology of tributes and victors, and the political design choices that make Panem feel uncomfortably plausible. At face value, you're watching a YA dystopia. But here's the real question. Why does it feel so familiar when Snow talks about hope as a weapon, or when District 12's children grow up staring at houses they'll probably never enter? If you've seen our breakdowns on Victor's Village, you know the pattern. We pulled receipts from the books and the films, Katniss hiding in an empty house when the fence goes live, Haymitch rotting in his mansion, Coin turning victors into propaganda, and then we build out the implications like a game maker designing an arena. Every choice has a reason, every reward has a cost. This episode sits in an ongoing series on the most dangerous players in Panem. We've already unpacked Snow's obsession with controlled hope, and we're going to cover Coin's cold calculus, Haymitch's weaponized apathy, and yes, Katniss herself as a reluctant symbol. But Peeta is the one who keeps slipping through the cracks of those conversations, even though other victors literally decide he's the priority to keep alive. If you're the sort of person who sees a single pre-games interview and thinks, hold on, that speech just rewired the entire arena, you're in the right district. You don't have to do anything right now. But if you love overthinking the Hunger Games, the rules, the propaganda, the relationships, the way a simple promise on live TV can destabilize an empire, this little corner of YouTube is our not a piece in their game zone. Pattern interrupt here because it's important. We're not here to crown a favorite character. We're here to ask why the Capitol fears different people in different ways. Snow fears Katniss's existence. He fears Peeta's words. And that part matters because Peeta's whole philosophy, I just don't want them to change me, I don't want to be a piece in their games, isn't a soft, romantic line. It's a strategic refusal to let the Capitol define his identity, and that turns out to be more dangerous than open rebellion. Katniss's first instinct is survival. Peeta's first instinct is narrative control. So as we go back into that interview room, keep this in mind. Katniss is trying to stay alive for her family. Peeta is about to reprogram how the audience sees a tribute. Next, we'll track how that single choice, refusing to be a piece, turns the Capitol's favorite love story into its most volatile weapon. Peeta's first rebellion. I don't want to be a piece in their games. And you really see that reprogramming start not in the arena, but on a quiet rooftop the night before the games. We're so used to remembering that scene as the star-crossed lovers prequel that it's easy to miss what Peeta actually does there. He looks at the Capitol's shining skyline, the place that owns his body, his name, his district's fear, and he says the one thing you are absolutely not supposed to say before a televised execution: I don't want them to change me. I don't want to be a piece in their games. At face value, that sounds almost gentle, a personal preference. But here's the real question. Why is that line more dangerous than Katniss's open defiance with the berries later on? Because the entire Hunger Games system depends on tributes accepting their role as pieces. The reaping tells you you're livestock. The parade costumes turn you into property. The training scores rank your market value. The promise is simple. Perform well. Maybe you become a victor. Maybe your district gets food. Maybe your family survives. You're supposed to internalize that logic. That's how the Capitol keeps control. Peeta quietly opts out. He doesn't say, "I want to win." He doesn't even say, "I want to escape." He says, "I want to die as myself." That part matters because it attacks the game's psychological design at the root. If tributes stop believing their pieces, the board stops working. Now compare that to Katniss in the same moment. Her questions are practical. How do I survive? How do I protect Prim? What's the strategy in the arena? Rebellion for her is a byproduct of those survival choices. She volunteers for Prim, she shoots the apple, she threatens the berries, but in her head, she's still playing the games. Because she has to. Peeta is already refusing the premise. This is where we talk about how that rooftop philosophy becomes a blueprint. His love confession in the interviews. On the surface, it's romance. In practice, it's narrative hijacking. He turns himself and Katniss from pieces on a board into a story the Capitol audience emotionally invests in. Suddenly, killing them isn't just enforcing order, it's cancelling the Capitol's favourite show, then the Berry Gambit. Everyone remembers Katniss holding out the nightlock, but Peeta's role is crucial. He doesn't argue for his own survival. He's willing to die with her, rather than let the Capitol script a neat, single victor ending. That's the rooftop promise. Scaled up, if the only way to stay himself is to break their story, he'll break it, even if it kills him. And after the games, he keeps doing it. He refuses to let the Capitol define his relationship with Katniss as pure performance, even when that would be safer. The fake pregnancy, the proposal on live TV, the speeches on the victory tour, there is a lot to uncover here, but the pattern is consistent. Peeta keeps grabbing the microphone and rewriting what a tribute, what a victor, is allowed to be. So what do you do if you're Snow and you're facing a boy who won't be a piece in your games? You don't just remove him from the board, you change the piece. Next, we're going to cover how the Capitol's most terrifying weapon isn't execution at all. It's editing a person from the inside out, until even Peeta can't trust his own memories of who he is. Katniss the spark versus Peeta the strategist. Two kinds of dangerous. So, if the Capitol can rewrite a person from the inside out, here's the real question. Which version of dangerous are they actually trying to erase? Katniss's arrows or Peeta's words? At face value, Katniss is the obvious threat. You see her and you immediately understand why the Capitol is nervous. She's volatile, emotional, and when she makes a decision, it happens in the space of a heartbeat. Prim's name is called, and before anyone can process it, Katniss is already screaming that she volunteers. No speech, no plan, just raw instinct. That part matters because Katniss's power is in what you can't miss. She breaks arenas. She sings to a dying girl on national television. She pulls out nightlock berries and turns a rigged finale into a potential double suicide. Her rebellion is physical, visible, and very hard to spin away in the moment. You can't edit out a girl holding poison to her lips while every district is watching. But this is where we talk about Peeta, because Peeta's danger isn't in what he does with a weapon, it's in what he does with a microphone. He's the one tribute in the 74th Games who uses his pre-games interview to challenge the story itself. When he confesses he's in love with Katniss, he isn't just being romantic, he's reframing the entire event. Suddenly, these aren't just tributes, they're doomed lovers the Capitol is about to tear apart. For entertainment. Katniss volunteers on instinct for Prim. Peeta takes that same instinct and turns it into a narrative the Capitol can't fully control. The girl who would die for her sister, and the boy who would die for that girl. The rule change? The star-crossed lovers angle. That's the system bending around Peeta's storycraft. He doesn't change the arena. He changes what the arena means to the people watching from every district. So you get two kinds of dangerous. Katniss is the spark the Capitol can't fully script. Even when they dress her, choreograph her, parade her. She keeps doing things no one wrote into the show. Peeta is the strategist who keeps rewriting the script from inside their own broadcast system. Snow needs the games to promise order and control. Peeta keeps turning them into a referendum on whether that control is moral. There is a lot to uncover here in how complementary they are. Katniss makes moments the Capitol has to air. Peeta tells the audience what those moments mean. On the victory tour, he pushes the fake pregnancy, the proposal, the shared trauma, constantly nudging the relationship between Victor and District toward open sympathy and away from fear. So in a dictatorship built on televised fear and rationed hope, which is harder to contain, a rogue archer or a rogue storyteller who can flip your own audience against you? Next, we're going to cover how the Capitol tries to answer that question in the most brutal way possible by turning Peeta's greatest weapon, his mind, against itself. The interview that broke the game, Peeta's love confession as weapon. So when the Capitol decides to go after Peeta's mind, we have to rewind to the moment that made that necessary in the first place. Because Peeta doesn't start as a soldier. He starts as a storyteller on a couch in front of Caesar Flickerman. You remember the setup. The pre-games interviews are supposed to be harmless pageantry, a final chance for the Capitol to rank tributes by charm before they rank them by body count. Katniss fumbles through her segment, all fire dress and social anxiety. Then Peeta sits down, smiles, and drops the bomb. He's in love with the girl from his district. At face value, it plays as a shy confession. Caesar spins it instantly into a swoony narrative. Star-crossed lovers, tragic relationship, perfect ratings bait. But here's the real question. Is this a boy accidentally blurting out a crush on national television, or a tribute who has already decided he will not be just another piece in their games? There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta understands the Capitol only cares about two things: spectacle and story. By giving them a clean, addictive hook, he quietly upgrades himself and Katniss from replaceable pieces to protagonists in the Capitol's own show. Once you're the main characters, the rules start to orbit you. That part matters because we see the proof inside the arena. Suddenly, the game makers are leaning into the romance edit. The camera lingers on every touch, every whispered word in the cave. Sponsors send medicine not just to keep a tribute alive, but to keep a love story going. And then, the break in the system. Claudius Templesmith's announcement that for the first time ever, two tributes from the same district can win. An unprecedented rule change, mid-games, clearly tailored to one couple. The arena, which was supposed to be pure law, bends around a narrative. So why is that more dangerous than an arrow to the throat? Because Peeta has just exposed the games as television, not destiny. If the Capitol can change the rules to protect its favorite love story, then the games are not sacred punishment from on high. They are a product chasing ratings and audience tears. Once the districts see that, the aura of absolute power cracks. If rules can be rewritten for romance, why not for rebellion? If the promise of one victor can become two, what else has been negotiable this whole time? This is where we talk about real power. Snow rules through fear, but his system survives on consent, on people believing the structure is immovable. Peeta's confession quietly proves it is not. He weaponizes hope by showing that if you make the right story irresistible, even the Capitol flinches. And Peeta is not done, because the moment you allow two victors from the same district, you open a door Peeta and Katniss can slam in your face. Next, we're going to cover how that sweet star-crossed romance mutates into the Berry Gambit, a live televised hostage situation where the Capitol's own rule change becomes the knife at its throat. The Berry Gambit, how Peeta turns romance into mutiny. So we get to the lake. The cannons have gone quiet. The rule change that allowed two victors from the same district has just been yanked away, and suddenly the fairy tale turns back into what it always was: a slaughterhouse. At face value, the Capitol is just restoring the original rules. One victor, one story. Clean, simple, brutal. But here's the real question. Why does that reversal feel so desperate? You can feel it even on the page. This isn't confident authority. This is the game makers realizing they've handed Katniss and Peeta relationship so powerful it's starting to control the games instead of decorating them. Katniss's response is famous. The Nightlock buries the proposal of a joint suicide. But this is where we talk about Peeta. Watch his reaction closely. She holds out death in her palm, and he doesn't bargain, doesn't argue, doesn't say, "Wait, maybe I can kill you and win." He steps toward her and says, "On the count of 3, that part matters because it tells you he understands the stakes instantly." This isn't a romantic gesture, it's a strategic acceptance. Peeta is fully willing to die here, and not in a vague, heroic way. His entire arc has been about not being a piece in their games. This is the ultimate version of that promise. If the only way to keep his integrity is to deny the Capitol their ending, he'll burn the ending down. You're watching a tribute look at the camera and say, without words, you don't get to write this. So what's the trap he's walking into on purpose? It's a pure lose-lose for the Capitol. If they both eat the berries, the Capitol loses its victors, its star-crossed lovers, and the carefully manufactured hope it has been feeding the districts for days. 2 pretty corpses on the ground, and the story that survives is not the Capitol is powerful, it's even in death they refuse to play. How do you sell that on the victory tour? But if the Capitol stops them, and we know they do, then on live television they have just caved to tribute pressure. The all-powerful games suddenly have exceptions. Rules bend. The arena is revealed as negotiable. There is a lot to uncover here. Because once people see that a rule can be bent once, what's the obvious question? Why not again? Why not for my district? Why not to end the games entirely? Pattern interrupt. Forget Katniss for a second. Imagine you're Snow in the viewing room. You designed this spectacle to prove that every life is disposable, and you're watching a baker's son weaponize your own love story format against you in real time. Your game makers are screaming in your ear, cameras are zoomed in on those berries, and you have seconds to choose between a double martyrdom or a public surrender. Peeta forces the game itself to break to accommodate him. That's not rebellion by accident. That's a boy from District 12 turning the Capitol's greatest weapon into a hostage situation and winning. And the Capitol never forgets that, which is why in the next phase, we're going to cover how their entire strategy shifts from killing Peeta's body to rewriting his mind. From victor to viral threat. Why the Capitol can't kill Peeta yet. So now we're in the aftermath. The cannon never fires for Peeta or Katniss. Instead, the Capitol fanfare blares Claudius Templesmith declares 2 victors, and the arena that was supposed to prove total control becomes the stage where the games themselves back down. On paper, it's a fairy tale ending. 2 victors. A romantic miracle. At face value, Snow gets a perfect story to sell. But here's the real question. If he's so furious, if the system has just been humiliated on its own broadcast, why doesn't Peeta just disappear on the train ride home? This is where we talk about optics. Snow rules through fear, but he markets through promise. The games only work because every district believes in a twisted equation. Obey, play your role, and maybe you get a victor and a little hope. If Peeta slips and dies after forcing that rule change, the relationship between Capitol and districts changes overnight. Suddenly, the message isn't the Capitol rewards love and bravery, it's the Capitol will murder you for outsmarting them. That part matters because Peeta's stunt didn't just save Katniss, it handed the districts a narrative. a boy so in love he'd rather die than let the Capitol win. If Snow kills him now, he validates that story. Peeta becomes proof that defiance is real, that the romantic rebellion was never just a scripted act. He turns into a martyr the second his heart stops. So instead, Snow does something way more dangerous. He lets Peeta live as a victor. And victory is a force multiplier. Any tribute can cause trouble in an arena once. A victor isn't a one-episode tragedy. He's a regular in the Capitol's own programming. Interviews, victory tour speeches, fashion spreads, wedding specials. You're not just watching a boy from District 12 survive the games. You're watching him get handed a microphone again and again. We're going to cover how Victor's village turns winners into permanent cast members. But you can already see the trap here. The Capitol needs Peeta and Katniss to sell the star-crossed lovers storyline to patch the damage from the berries. So, they double down. They stage kisses on couches. They parade them through every district as proof that the system is merciful and romantic. But every time they do that, they give Peeta more reach. Here's the paradox. The more the Capitol leans on the love story to stabilize the games, the more they hand the boy who broke their rules a megaphone he can eventually turn against them. Snow can threaten, he can script, he can demand public proposals and televised wedding planning, but he can't erase what everyone already saw. Peeta was willing to die rather than be at peace. And on the victory tour, he stops being content with surviving that narrative. He starts rewriting it. The berries were a hostage situation. The tour is where Peeta begins to turn that hostage into open unrest, and the Capitol realizes too late that their safest victor might be their most viral threat. The victory tour, Peeta learns to aim with words, not arrows. The Capitol thinks the victory tour is damage control. Send the star-crossed victors through every district, roll out the cameras, hand them a script, and remind Panem that the games are still the only story that matters. But here's the real question. If the tour is supposed to seal the narrative, why does it end up cracking it open instead? At face value, the structure is simple. Train, district, speech, feast. Repeat. Each stop is choreographed. You stand before grieving families and say the words, "The Capitol wrote for you." You praise the fallen tributes as brave competitors. You thank the Capitol for its mercy. You reinforce that becoming a victor is the ultimate promise of escape. It's meant to be a victory lap that resells the games to every hungry child watching. Katniss is already allergic to that script. But Peeta? He initially tries to play along. He understands the relationship between performance and survival better than anyone. So he memorizes the lines, he flashes the practice smile, he does the dutiful fiancé routine because he knows Snow is measuring every breath. This is where we talk about the moment the script dies. Peeta steps up to the mic with his prepared remarks and throws them away. Instead, he apologizes directly to Rue's family. He offers them a portion of his and Katniss's winnings, a permanent tribute to a 12-year-old girl the Capitol wanted remembered as entertainment, not as a child with a name and a family. That part matters because he's not just grieving, he's redistributing victor wealth and reframing Rue as a victim of the Capitol, not a casualty of the arena. From there, he escalates. In district after district, he starts slipping in unscripted grief. He names the dead. He talks about nightmares. He refuses to let the fallen stay as glossy portraits on a screen. He drags them back into the realm of real people with real futures. Stolen. You can feel the air change. The crowd stop reacting as an audience and start reacting as mourners. So why is that more dangerous than Katniss aiming an arrow at the game makers? Because Peeta is teaching the districts to feel the same thing at the same time, on camera. He's synchronizing grief, and in a system built on isolation, synchronized emotion is a weapon. And when Snow tightens the noose, Peeta doesn't back off. He pivots. On Caesar's stage before the quarter quell, he drops the fake pregnancy reveal. It's pure narrative warfare. If the Capitol punishes them now, they're not just killing rebellious victors, they're killing a child. He turns the Capitol's appetite for melodrama into a shield, forcing them into a relationship with an unborn baby that doesn't exist. There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta's not just lying, he's stress testing the system. How far can he push before the audience turns on Snow instead of him? How much hope can he smuggle into a story that was supposed to be about submission, and other victors are watching? By the time the quarter quell reaping happens, they've seen the boy with the bread hijack an entire country's feelings with a few sentences. So when it comes time to choose who must live, their answer isn't Katniss. Why would hardened killers decide the soft-spoken baker is the one piece the Capitol can never be allowed to capture? We're going to cover that next. Why the victors choose Peeta over Katniss in Catching Fire? The answer starts with the quarter quell itself. On paper, the twist is simple. Instead of reaping kids, the Capitol reaches back into the pool of surviving victors, the people who've already beaten the games. At face value, it's revenge dressed up as ceremony. You cause trouble? Back in the arena. But here's the real question. What happens when you drag every living symbol of defiance, trauma, and survival into one enclosed space and hand them weapons? You get a potential war council. From the moment that card is read, the balance shifts. Victor's village stops being a retirement plan and becomes a waiting room for execution. That part matters because it strips away the last promise the Capitol ever gave them: win, and you're safe. So when these seasoned killers step onto the quarter quell beach, they're not just playing for their own districts anymore, they're deciding what kind of world, if any, comes after the arena. And that's where the secret alliance comes in. Haymitch, Plutarch, Finnick, Johanna, Beatty, Wyrus, even Cedar and Mags to a point, people from multiple districts with every reason to hate each other, are quietly coordinated around one mission. Keep Peeta Mellark alive, not Katniss, Peeta. We're going to cover the mechanics of that in more detail later, but in Catching Fire, you see the pattern everywhere. Finnick dives into the water to save Peeta from the force field. Johanna nearly gets herself killed retrieving him from the cornucopia. Haymitch trades favors, years in advance, to secure Peeta allies. Why? Because Katniss is the spark. But Peeta is the person who can stand in front of a camera and convince an entire country that the fire is worth dying for. This is where we talk about charisma as a weapon. Haymitch spells it out. Peeta is the one who makes people like him on sight. In a games built on spectacle, that's not a cute personality trait. That's artillery. You saw it in his first interview when he hijacks the narrative with the love confession. You see it again when he proposes on live television or claims Katniss is pregnant to stall the quell. Every time, the Capitol's own stage becomes his battlefield. Pattern interrupt for you. We're so used to the fan reading that the rebellion needs Katniss as the mockingjay that we assume every adult in the room agrees. But in-universe, the victor's behavior screams the opposite. If they can only smuggle one piece off the board, they choose the boy who can talk Panem down from the ledge, not the girl who keeps aiming arrows at the Capitol's throat. There is a lot to uncover here, especially when you realize Snow and Coin both try to weaponize that same quality. So how does Peeta's philosophy, and his refusal to be a piece in their games, turn that charisma into something even more dangerous than Katniss's bow? That's where we're headed next. Peeta's arena strategy, useful, invisible, and always watching. So if Peeta's philosophy is that he won't be a piece in their games, how does that actually look when you drop him into an arena designed to kill him in under a week? Here's the real question. Is he just talking big on Caesar's couch, Or is he quietly running a strategy Katniss doesn't even see? This is where we talk about the 74th Games, because on paper, Peeta's first move looks terrible. He joins the career pack, the same group trained from birth to murder kids from districts like his. At face value, that reads as betrayal, but why would the boy who throws bread to a starving girl suddenly get loyal to District 1? He doesn't. He gets useful. He knows careers won't waste a strong, charming baker who can pull intel out of Katniss and read the arena for them. Peeta turns himself into a tool they don't want to put down yet. He carries supplies, offers strategy, flatters their egos, and constantly nudges them toward underestimating him. Remember how he plays up his supposed crush as a weakness they can exploit? That part matters because he's feeding their illusion that they're the real predators, while he's just the lovesick tag-along. And then there's the camouflage. Everyone remembers Katniss in a tree. You almost forget Peeta literally disappears into the ground. He's bleeding out, abandoned, and still manages to use his cake-decorating skill to vanish into the riverbank. Who does that when they're half dead? Someone who understands that in these games, being unseen is safer than being armed. While Katniss is the visible threat shooting fireballs out of the sky, Peeta is the mudslick shadow listening, watching, tracking where the careers move and how the audience reacts. We're going to cover his psychological reads too, because this is where he's lethal. Peeta clocks Cato's ego and constantly feeds it, so Cato never recognizes that the weak District 12 boy is the one steering conversations. He reads Katniss's trust issues and keeps giving her choices instead of orders, which is why she eventually stakes her survival on his word. And he reads the audience better than anyone. The star-crossed lovers, the rule change, the berries. He understands that the capital has promised the districts a story of hope, and if he threatens to break that story, the game makers will blink first. Now jump to the quarter quell. The arena is deadlier, the tributes are smarter, and somehow Peeta is more dangerous, not less. He's the one who thinks to use the force field to revive Finnick. Who does that under pressure? Someone constantly scanning not just for physical threats, but for how relationships can be leveraged. He's mapping alliances while others map terrain. He notices who protects whom at the cornucopia, who volunteers information, who hesitates. There is a lot to uncover here, but the pattern is simple. Katniss is looking for targets. Peeta is looking for pressure points. And that combination, tactical intelligence plus narrative awareness, is exactly why Snow doesn't just kill him. Why waste a weapon when you can reforge it? The next step is what happens when the capital takes that mind, that charisma, and turns it inward. Because a hijacked Peeta might be the most dangerous version of him yet. Snow's nightmare scenario. A Peeta who won't break. So put yourself in Snow's position for a second. You don't just have a troublesome archer, you have a boy who can walk onto a stage, smile into a camera, and quietly rearrange the entire emotional landscape of Panem. This is where we talk about Snow as a strategist, not a cartoon villain. His job isn't to kill every rebel. His job is to make sure most people never risk becoming rebels in the first place. The capital's whole system runs on two fuels, fear and carefully measured hope. Too much fear, and the districts explode. Too much hope, and the games lose their power. Peeta is dangerous because he scrambles that balance on purpose. At face value, it's a sweet confession from a boy with a crush. But here's the real question. Why does that moment force the game makers to rewrite the rules of their own arena? Peeta turns personal emotion into public leverage. He makes the audience root for a relationship instead of a bloodbath. That part matters because Snow suddenly has millions of citizens emotionally invested in two tributes surviving together. Any move against them now carries a political price, so why not just kill him and be done with it? From Snow's perspective, that's the worst answer. Execute Peeta after the games and you don't erase the story, you confirm it. You prove the Capitol punishes love, mercy, and defiance. You turn the boy with the bread into a martyr whose death says, "You were right to hate us." In a world where one handful of berries already rattled the regime, does Snow really want to hand the districts a perfect symbol of crushed hope? But letting him live freely is even more dangerous. A victor doesn't disappear. A victor becomes infrastructure. Peeta would keep mentoring, keep doing interviews, keep appearing on every broadcast the Capitol uses to sell the games as tradition and entertainment. And every time he opens his mouth, he has the power to bend that message. The fake pregnancy on the Quarter Quell tour, the proposal, the way he humanizes Katniss to people who will never meet her, he's quietly putting cracks in the idea that tributes are disposable. Snow's specific nightmare is that Peeta doesn't just humanize himself. He humanizes the girl on fire. Suddenly, Katniss isn't a symbol you can bomb. She's a person millions have watched fall in love, grieve, and try to build a future. How do you execute that on live TV without risking open revolt in more than one district? How do you punish her without punishing the promise Peeta has sold to the audience? So we're going to cover Snow's solution in the next part. When you can't remove a piece from the board without starting a war, what do? You rewrite the piece. And the hijacking of Peeta is Snow's attempt to do exactly that, to turn the Capitol's greatest narrative threat into its sharpest weapon. The terrifying part is how well it almost works. Hijacking Peeta. When the Capitol admits they can't beat your story. Hijacking is the moment the Capitol basically admits, "We can't beat your story, so we'll corrupt the storyteller." At face value, it sounds sci-fi and vague. In universe, it's horrifyingly specific. They take Tracker Jacker Venom, this hallucinogenic, terror-inducing toxin from the games, and combine it with torture, repetition, and conditioning until your memories are no longer yours. This is where we talk about what they actually do to Peeta. They replay his history with Katniss over and over, but they lace every image with pain and panic. The cave, the arena, the beach in the Quarter Quell. Every moment that used to mean safety and hope now gets chemically welded to fear. So when he sees Katniss, his brain doesn't say ally or love interest. It says mutation, trap, kill or be killed. Why go to that level? Why not just execute him on live TV as a warning to every district? Here's the real question. What does it tell you that Snow doesn't want Peeta gone? He wants him repurposed. The Capitol understands that Peeta's face, voice, and history are political assets. This is the boy who turned a pre-games interview into a rule change. The victor who sold a fake pregnancy so convincingly that even Capitol citizens started questioning the morality of the games. So they don't silence him, they rebrand him. Hijacked Peeta becomes a walking, talking counter-narrative. His broadcasts from the Capitol are designed to puncture the rebellion's confidence. Every time he appears, thin and shaking, warning District 13 that Katniss is being used, that the war will cost more lives than it saves, he's seeding doubt. Is the Mockingjay really our hope, or just another piece in their games? That part matters because Peeta's credibility doesn't vanish with his torture. The relationship the audience has with him is still there. You remember the boy with the bread. The Capitol remembers the golden boy who always told the truth. So when that same mouth says, "Stop," this is wrong. It lands differently than if some random peacekeeper delivered the message. And then there's the personal impact. His attack on Katniss in District 13 isn't just a jump scare. It's a political earthquake. If the symbol of unity can't even be safe around her supposed partner, what does that do to rebel morale? To Coyne's careful framing of the Mockingjay as controlled, inspirational, stable, Peeta's broken state destabilizes Katniss emotionally and the movement strategically at the same time. Pattern interrupt for a second. Imagine an alternate timeline where the Capitol hijacks Katniss instead. She comes on screen in full Mockingjay armor, telling the districts to stand down. Would it work the same way? Not really. People already fear Katniss. She's the girl on fire, the explosive, unpredictable victor from a coal district. Her turning would read as coercion or mutiny. Peeta turning, though, that feels like your conscience switching sides. And that's the admission baked into the hijacking. If Peeta weren't uniquely persuasive and beloved, twisting him into a mouthpiece wouldn't be worth the effort. They hijack him because his authentic self is too dangerous to leave intact, and because even broken, he can still move the board in ways arrows never could. Even broken, he's dangerous. Hijacked Peeta as a wild card. So what happens when you take the most disarming person in Panem and turn him into a weapon that can't tell what's real? You don't remove him from the board. You make him unpredictable. In District 13, hijacked Peeta walks in as a broadcast and then as a body, and both versions rip through the underground order they've built. Katniss is supposed to be Coin's clean symbol of hope, the Mockingjay who hits her marks and sells the war. But every time Peeta appears on a screen, her focus fractures. She's not thinking about strategy or the next propo. She's thinking, is he still in there? Is this my Peeta or the Capitol's piece? Here's the real question. Why is one broken victor enough to shake an entire underground government? Because Peeta doesn't just threaten Snow, he threatens Coin. His very existence forces the rebellion to look at the cost of their own games, the torture, the hijacking, the fact that their weapon Mockingjay is also a traumatized teenager who might have to kill the boy who once saved her. This is where we talk about the choking scene. At face value, it's a jump scare. Peeta sees Katniss, his hijacked memories fire, and he almost strangles the face of the rebellion to death in a concrete hallway. But that part matters because it's the Capitol's strategy made literal. Turn the rebellion's greatest assets against each other. You watch Boggs slam Peeta into the wall, guards storm in, and suddenly the safest place in Panem, Coin's bunker, looks vulnerable from the inside. Katniss survives, but the message is clear. If Peeta can nearly kill her with his bare hands, what else could he do under the wrong trigger? Who can Coin trust to be alone with him? Who can Katniss trust herself to be? So how do the rebels talk about him after that? Coin and Plutarch don't frame Peeta as a person. They frame him as a weapon with a glitch. First, he's the Capitol's mouthpiece, proof on every broadcast that Snow can twist a beloved victor into a puppet. Then, once the hijacking starts to loosen, they immediately see the propaganda value in his recovery. Imagine the headline, "The boy with the bread, tortured by the Capitol choosing to stand with the districts anyway." We're going to cover how dangerous that choice really is, but even in the hospital, Peeta holds narrative power. His constant, real or not real, isn't just a coping mechanism. It's a live debate about truth in a world built on televised lies. He complicates the clean good/evil story both sides want to sell. If your symbol of hope is also your most damaged victim, what does victory even mean? And here's the quiet twist. The danger doesn't vanish when the war ends. Peeta and Katniss building a life in the ashes of District 12 isn't a neat happily ever after. It's an ongoing refusal to let the games define their relationship, their children, or their memories. The question is, when the arena is gone but the nightmares stay, what does resistance look like then? There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta after the war, the most subversive ending in the series. So when we jump to that meadow in the epilogue, it's easy to read it as Suzanne Collins finally giving Katniss and Peeta a break. Sun, kids, dandelions, roll credits. But here's the real question. What are they actually doing there, in the ruins of District 12, besides surviving? At face value, it looks almost aggressively normal. They're playing with their children on the same ground that once held mass graves. Katniss is still counting the days between nightmares. Peeta still has hijacked flashbacks that can snap without warning. The war is over, Snow is dead, the capital has fallen. So why does it feel less like a reward and more like a long, stubborn experiment in staying human after the games? This is where we talk about Peeta's original philosophy. Back in the training center, he tells Katniss he doesn't just want to be a piece in their games. He's willing to die if that's the price of dying as himself. The twist is, he doesn't die. He lives. And post-war Peeta quietly upgrades that philosophy from a dramatic last stand to a daily practice. He refuses to be frozen as the boy with the bread, or reduced to the hijacked weapon, or framed as nothing more than the Mockingjays' love interest. Think about the options the world offers him. The new government could have turned him into a permanent symbol of reconciliation, parading him through every district as proof that even a broken victor can be fixed. Or he could have leaned into martyrdom, the tragic survivor whose trauma is his whole personality. Instead, he bakes, he plants primroses, he helps rebuild Victor's village. He chooses a small, repetitive life that in this universe is almost scandalously radical. Why is that so subversive? Because both the Capitol and the rebels dealt in spectacle. The games made children into weapons. Coin's war strategy did the same thing with victors. The promise was always that you could matter if you bled publicly enough. Peeta and Katniss choosing domestic, imperfect, ongoing healing is a refusal of that bargain. No cameras, no speeches, just a long, boring, extremely dangerous insistence on being people instead of symbols. And notice Peeta's role in that relationship. Katniss drifts toward nihilism. Her instinct, over and over, is that the only winning move is not to play. Peeta keeps dragging the conversation back to small, specific reasons to keep going. The bread in the rain, the children in the meadow, the plant book in their victor's village kitchen. In a world trained to think in arenas and body counts, he's weaponizing tiny moments of hope as a counter-argument to the game's dehumanization. There is a lot to uncover here, because that part matters in terms of danger. A man who can survive hijacking, war, and grief, and still choose tenderness? That's a threat to any system built on fear. But to really understand why this quiet meadow ending is the most subversive move in the series, we need to zoom all the way back to the beginning and ask, from the reaping onward, why were Peeta's rules for playing the games completely different from Katniss's? Instinct versus intention. How Katniss and Peeta start from different wars. From the very first chapter, Katniss and Peeta are not actually in the same war. They're in the same arena, sure, but they're fighting two totally different enemies. For Katniss, the enemy is hunger, the cold, the peacekeeper's gun. Back then, her life is one long calculation of how do I get through today. She hunts illegally because the alternative is her family starving. She volunteers for Prim because the alternative is her sister dying on national television. When she steps onto that train to the capital, the games are at face value a nightmare obstacle course she has to survive, not a political machine she has to dismantle. That part matters because it means her rebellion, at first, is almost accidental. You're watching someone whose instincts are wired for protection, not ideology. She shoots the apple out of the pig's mouth because she's angry and humiliated, not because she's making a statement about class and spectacle. She sings to Rue because she's planning a symbol. The district sees a martyr, the capital sees a problem. Katniss just sees a girl who shouldn't have died. Peeta walks into the same arena asking a completely different question. What happens to me if they win? Not my body, myself. In the interview with Caesar, he's already framing the capital as an owner that might erase him. His famous line about not wanting them to change him is the mission statement of his entire arc. He's terrified of dying, Yes, but he's more terrified of becoming a puppet, a mask, a product. Here's the real question. Which threat keeps Snow up at night? The girl who might blow up an arena, or the boy who publicly questions the Capitol's right to define who he is? Peeta's rebellion starts in language, in narrative. He turns a deathmatch into a love story, then weaponizes that story to force a rule change. He makes the games break their own script. As the series goes on, their wars cross in the middle. Katniss is pushed into politics. Peeta is pushed down into bare survival. The victory tour, the fake pregnancy, the proposal on camera. This is where we talk about Katniss becoming a symbol on purpose. She starts asking why the districts are starving, why the games exist at all, why Snow is allowed to promise hope and deliver terror. Her target shifts from the mutts in front of me to the man in the roses. Meanwhile, Peeta is hijacked until he can't trust his own memories. The boy who feared losing himself is forced to fight for basic reality. His rebellion collapses inward. Every correct memory is an act of resistance. And yet, even broken, he's still dangerous, because his core question hasn't changed. He still refuses to let the capital or coin decide who he is. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Katniss starting with Peeta's philosophy. She volunteers not just to save Prim, but to burn the premise of the games on live TV. No pretending, no confusion, just open defiance of the capital's ownership. Does the rebellion ignite faster? Almost definitely. Does it get bloodier with the capital crushing District 12 before anyone can organize? Also, almost definitely, we're going to cover how that slow, crossed evolution instinct into ideology, ideology into survival, turns Peeta into something even scarier than a symbol, a storyteller the capital can't fully control. Charisma as a weapon, how Peeta becomes the capital's darling on purpose. So if Peeta evolves from instinct to ideology to survival strategy, this is where we talk about his sharpest weapon. Not the bread, the charm. On paper, Peeta's just the nice one. But here's the real question. How does the nice one end up being the capital's darling and still manage to undermine the games from the inside? The answer is in those interviews where he turns charisma into armor and then into a blade. Watch his first pre-games interview with Caesar. At face value, he's just a sweet baker's son, self-deprecating, joking about having no chance, openly admitting he's been in love with a girl from his district forever. He stumbles a little, he blushes, he looks away at the exact right moments. It feels honest because it is emotionally vulnerable, but it's also ruthlessly efficient. He gives the capital an easy story to root for, and in doing so, he quietly rewrites the narrative of what a tribute is allowed to be. There is a lot to uncover here, because Peeta's real talent isn't just talking, it's reading the room. With Caesar, he leans into humor and romance. With Snow, he switches to careful, almost deferential politeness, giving just enough obedience to look safe while never quite promising what Snow wants most: silence. With Haymitch, he's blunt and strategic. With Katniss, he's disarming, using honesty as a way to build trust in a place where trust gets you killed. Even in the arena, he's doing this. Around the careers, he plays the eager ally, the useful storyteller who knows Katniss's strengths, the boy who can paint camouflage and carry supplies. He makes himself indispensable without ever looking threatening. Why does that work? Because the careers and the capital watching see what they expect to see. A soft-hearted District 12 boy clinging to stronger tributes. They don't notice he's studying them the whole time. That part matters, because once people like you, punishment gets complicated. The more the capital audience adores Peeta, the harder it is for Snow to hurt him without risking backlash across every district that's invested in the star-crossed lover's narrative. So when Peeta drops subversive lines, hinting he doesn't want to be a piece in their games, pushing the pregnancy story on the victory tour, those messages ride in on a wave of affection the Capitol itself helped create. Now compare that to Katniss. She struggles with the cameras. She's awkward, defensive, sometimes openly hostile. Her relationship to the audience is jagged. That makes her powerful as a symbol, but it also makes her easy for the Capitol to frame as unstable, dangerous, even ungrateful for the so-called promise of being a victor. Peeta is the opposite problem. He's too easy to love. So how far does that go? In the next section, we're going to cover the exact speeches where his charisma doesn't just charm the Capitol, it bends public opinion in real time, in ways even Snow and later Coin can't fully control. The speeches that shook Panem, Peeta's greatest hits. So when we say Peeta is too easy to love, this is where that turns from personality trait into weapon. Because his most dangerous moves, they're not with a sword or a syringe, they're with a microphone. Let's go back to that very first interview with Caesar Flickerman. At face value, the love confession sounds impulsive, even embarrassing. Boy admits crush on girl. Capitol swoons. Katniss wants to strangle him backstage. But here's the real question. What does that confession do to the structure of the games themselves? Suddenly, this isn't random slaughter from 12 districts. It's a tragic romance. The Capitol audience is invested in a relationship, not just a body count, which forces the game makers into reactive mode. They literally change the rules to allow 2 victors from the same district. Peeta has just rewritten the promise of the arena using nothing but narrative. That part matters, because he keeps doing it. On the victory tour, his job is to sell the official story. The games were glorious. Your children died for unity. Long live Snow. Instead, he leans into apology. He tells families he's sorry, that their children deserved better, that nothing can make up for what happened. You're watching a victor validate district grief on live television. We're going to cover how Katniss's salute in District 11 sparks open defiance. But Peeta's emotional honesty is the fuel. He refuses to gloss over the horror, which quietly legitimizes every angry whisper against the Capitol. If the Golden Boy is saying this feels wrong, how many people at home start to agree? Then he escalates. The fake pregnancy reveal before the quarter quell is not a random outburst. It's targeted psychological warfare. Peeta takes the Capitol's own morality theater, their obsession with young love, heirs, the promise of a future, and turns it on Snow. Punishing Katniss now means bombing a pregnant victor. What does that look like on camera? Monstrous. He's weaponizing the spectacle against the man who created it, forcing the Capitol audience to confront the question, why are we sending a supposed mother back into the arena at all? Even when Snow hijacks him, the words are still dangerous. Peeta's Capitol broadcasts are meant as pure propaganda, but his sincerity bleeds through the conditioning. He looks terrified. He's begging Katniss to stop, warning District 13 about impending attacks. This is where we talk about unintended audiences. Capitol citizens see a broken victor they supposedly rescued, now warning of more war. Rebels see someone they trust enough to hesitate. His warnings land harder precisely because he doesn't sound like a mouthpiece. He sounds like Peeta. So what's the through line in all these speeches? They keep forcing powerful people to respond to him instead of the other way round. Snow, Coin, the game makers, they're always adjusting to whatever narrative Peeta just dropped on air. And underneath that pattern is a deeper strategic brain. He isn't just emoting in the moment, he's playing a long game across all 3 books. The real question is, when did he start? And how many of those spontaneous speeches were actually planned moves on a much bigger board? Peeta's long game, from bakery boy to master of 4D chess. So let's actually track the board. If Peeta's playing 4D chess, where do we see the opening moves? The mid-game. Because at face value, he's just the soft-spoken baker's son who got lucky surviving twice. On paper, volunteering to join the careers when you're from a poor district is suicidal. So why does he do it? He's buying proximity. He gets intel on their plans, keeps them focused on hunting Katniss, and positions himself as useful but non-threatening. That part matters because it lets him secretly protect her twice, warning her about the tracker-jacker plot, and later misleading the careers at the river. He's not just staying alive, he's shaping the relationship between Katniss and the audience. He's the boy who chose her, even when she can't see him. Then comes the pivot, the love story, his rooftop "I want to die as myself" speech. That's not just philosophy, it's a narrative test balloon. In the interviews, he pushes it further, dropping the love confession that forces the game makers to rewrite their own rules. Who else in the arena gets the capital to edit the games mid-broadcast? We're going to cover his charisma more later, but here's the real question. Who realizes first that the story is more powerful than the sword? It's not Katniss, it's Peeta. By the quarter quell, you can see the long game. Katniss walks in as the face of rebellion. Snow has already framed her as dangerous, so Peeta does the exact opposite. He leans into vulnerability, romance, tragedy. He proposes on air, he plays up the star-crossed lovers, he invents the pregnancy. Every move drags attention away from Katniss the symbol and toward Katniss and Peeta the doomed couple. Why does that matter? Because it makes the capital audience emotionally complicit. Killing her now isn't just enforcing order. It's breaking a promise they've been sold for a year. And notice the victor's response. In the arena, multiple allies are prepared to die for him instead of Katniss. That's not random. They understand that in a propaganda war, the boy who can turn a talk show into a riot is the more irreplaceable piece. Then war hits, and you'd think hijacking takes him off the board. Pattern interrupt. This is where we talk about Peeta warning District 13. On live TV, he's tortured, drugged, half out of his mind, and he still uses his tiny window of agency to shout that an attack is coming. He's not choosing a side, he's choosing lives, even as a weapon of the capital. His instinct is, what message here prevents the most deaths? Stack those moments together, and a pattern appears. Katniss thinks in terms of shots, days, districts. Peeta thinks in terms of arcs. What story does this create? What promise does it make to the audience? How will breaking that promise expose the capital's cruelty? And that's where his game quietly overlaps with Snow's. Both men understand that the real arena is narrative. Snow engineers hope, fear, and spectacle to keep the games, and the districts, under control. Peeta hijacks those same tools to humanize the victims and destabilize the system. Two chess players, same board, same pieces. One is trying to freeze the story in place. The other is slowly, relentlessly rewriting the ending. And the next phase of his strategy only gets darker once the capital tries to turn his greatest weapon, his voice, against the rebellion. Book Peeta versus movie Peeta. Which version is more dangerous? And this is where we talk about perception. Because once the capital hijacks Peeta's voice, your experience of him splits in two. Book Peeta, who you mostly watch from the outside, at face value, those are the same boy with the bread. But here's the real question. Do they feel equally dangerous? On the page, Peeta is noisy in your head. You hear the running commentary, the way he clocks how the audience reacts, how he adjusts his tone mid-sentence, how he's always asking why the games work the way they do. Suzanne Collins lets you sit in his philosophy about not being a piece. His quiet disgust at the victor system, his strategic reasoning for every hand squeeze and every joke. There is a lot to uncover here, and most of it is sharper than the movies have time to show. On screen, especially on first watch, The edges are sanded down. The films lean harder into the soft, romantic angle. The rooftop confession, the way the camera lingers on him watching Katniss sleep. The wounded puppy shot when she pulls away. You're nudged to read him as the emotional center, the safe place, while Katniss is framed as the weapon. That part matters because it subtly shifts who you label as the threat. But notice what the movies choose to emphasize visually: the interviews, the hand holding on the train, the kiss in the cave, the public displays of affection on the victory tour. We're going to cover the speeches more later, but even in quick cuts, you see his charisma work on entire districts at once. Caesar Flickerman laughs when Peeta wants to die as himself. The crowd gasps at the love confession. Snow tightens his jaw when Peeta drops the pregnancy bomb. You don't hear his internal calculations, but you absolutely see the results. What gets downplayed is the political spine behind those moments. In the books, Peeta is constantly parsing the relationship between capital and districts, poking at the promise of the games as entertainment, wondering how far he can push before someone disappears him. His decision to paint Rue, his choice of words at the quell reaping, even the way he comforts the morphling, all of that is framed as conscious resistance, not just kindness. So which version is more dangerous? The honest answer is that you need both. The books give you the blueprint of a boy who understands narrative power. The films give you the undeniable visual proof that he knows exactly how he looks on camera and how to weaponize that image. Together, they reveal a victor whose real arena is the broadcast itself. But here's the real question for you. If you only had the movies, no internal monologue, no explicit strategy, would you still read Peeta as more dangerous than Katniss? Or does seeing the full threat require that book-level access to his mind? Hold that thought, because the next section is going to stress test that idea in a brutal way. The Capitol's camera problem. You can't edit out Peeta's humanity, so let's stress test it. Because once you put Peeta on camera, the Capitol runs into a problem it cannot solve with better editing or shinier costumes. At face value, the Capitol's media machine is airtight. You glamorize the games, you flatten tributes into neat archetypes, and you keep the districts emotionally invested, but politically passive. You're not watching children die, you're watching the bloodbath, the star-crossed lovers, the career pack. It's a season of television, not a war crime. That part matters because if people feel too much of the wrong thing, the entire relationship between audience and arena breaks. Back then, the strategy is simple. You give every tribute a role: the ruthless killer, the doomed underdog, the comic relief. You pump them full of styling, soundtracks, and sound bites until the real human underneath disappears. So why is Peeta such a technical glitch in that system? This is where we talk about archetypes failing on contact with actual humanity. The Capitol wants Peeta to be the charming, nice boy, or the tragic lover accessory to Katniss. But he won't stay in those lanes. In his very first interview, he drops the "I've had a crush on you" line, which the Capitol reads as perfect romance bait. Here's the real question though. Why does that same move end up forcing the game makers to rewrite the rules of the games on live TV? Because Peeta keeps insisting on reality bleeding through the script. His grief for Rue during the victory tour isn't a tidy moment of solemn respect. It's raw, unedited mourning that echoes Katniss's salute and spreads through the district crowd. How do you cut around a silence that heavy? How do you score that with upbeat Capitol music without looking monstrous? We're going to cover more of his philosophy later, but notice the pattern. He shows visible fear and vulnerability in the arena. He's not the stoic hero, he's the boy shaking, bleeding, still trying to joke so Katniss won't panic. That honesty is hard to frame as bloodsport entertainment. You either show it and risk empathy, or you hide it and lose your authentic games. And then there's the berries. Peeta is fully willing to die with Katniss rather than play along. From a broadcast perspective, that's a nightmare. The whole promise of the Hunger Games is that someone wins, that being a victor is still the dream your district's children are supposed to chase. Two tributes choosing mutual suicide. That's not a love story, that's a live, televised rejection of the entire premise. Peeta's authenticity becomes a software bug in the Capitol's propaganda hardware. The more real he seems, the more dangerous he is, because real emotion doesn't cut cleanly into 30-second highlight reels without backfiring. And Snow isn't the only one who notices. Coin does too. Which leads to a darker twist. What happens when both sides stop seeing Peeta as a person at all and start seeing him only as a volatile broadcast asset they have to control or break? Hold on to that, because the next phase of his story turns that camera problem into a weapon. Hope versus fear. Why Peeta's version of hope terrifies dictators. So when both sides reduce Peeta to a volatile broadcast asset, you have to remember the line that started this whole problem for them. Snow swirling his drink, telling Seneca Crane, "Hope, it is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous." He isn't being poetic. He's giving you the user manual for the entire system. At face value, the Capitol runs on terror, public executions, the games, the threat of your child's name being pulled in front of the whole district. But here's the real question. If fear is so powerful, why bother with any hope at all? Why Victor's Village? Why the promise of glory? There is a lot to uncover here, because fear alone makes people desperate. Desperate people revolt. Snow wants something cleaner. What the Capitol really wants is controlled hope. The kind that says, maybe your kid volunteers and becomes a career victor. Maybe your grain quota goes up if your district performs well. Maybe, if you keep your head down, the games will reward you. It's the same logic as those mansions on the hill. You can see the luxury, you can't touch it. But you're told the system might give it to you if you play along. That part matters because it turns the games from a pure punishment into a twisted lottery. Peeta is the exact opposite of that. He doesn't sell hope that you might win. He sells hope that you can't be owned, even if you lose. From his very first interview, when he drops the star-crossed lovers line, he isn't just trying to survive, he's rewriting the relationship between tribute and audience. The question stops being who will win the games and becomes what if love or principle can push back on the rules? That's uncontrolled hope. And it spreads. Through the arena when he's willing to die with Katniss in the berry stunt. Through the victory tour when he casually announces a fake pregnancy on live TV and forces the game makers to flinch. Through his hijacking when he's been rewired to hate her and still keeps reaching for the truth instead of revenge. Every time he models a kind of moral resilience. You can be terrified, injured, brainwashed, and still refuse to become what the Capitol wants. Pattern interrupt for a second. Imagine you're trying to build a just world after the war. Who actually scares you more? Katniss, who might shoot you if you cross a line? Or Peeta, who convinces entire districts to question the line in the first place? This is where we talk about Coin. Her cold pragmatism depends on fear and scarcity. She needs people to believe there is no alternative except her authority. Peeta's version of hope is a direct threat to that too. And that's the reason both Snow and Coin keep trying to script him. Because if Peeta is allowed to speak freely, he doesn't just end the games, he ends the idea that anyone should own the narrative at all. Peeta versus Coin. Why the rebellion also tries to own him. So if both Snow and Coin want to own Peeta's story, what does that actually look like in practice? We've seen the Capitol's version, hijacking, torture, glossy interviews. But here's the real question. What does it say about the rebellion that their strategy doesn't look as different as you'd hope. This is where we talk about Coin. At face value, she's the anti-Snow, no roses, no poison breath, no decadent parties. She's austere to the point of being sterile. Her leadership is utilitarian, numbers-driven, obsessed with military victory and political consolidation. You eat your grey mush, you follow orders, you contribute to the war machine. Individual healing, moral nuance, those are luxuries for after the games are over, if they ever are. So when Katniss arrives in 13, Coin doesn't see a traumatized victor. She sees an asset, a resource, the Mockingjay. We're going to cover the Mockingjay propos more in other sections, but here, the key thing is how staged it all is. Battlefield visits are curated, reactions are coached, even her relationship with Gale is framed for maximum recruitment value. Coin wants a symbol that can promise hope without raising too many questions about what comes next. Then Peeta crashes the broadcast. His first Capitol interviews during the war are a nightmare for 13's messaging. He's a weapon turned against them, warning of mass casualties, urging a ceasefire, humanizing the enemy. Coin's response is not, "How do we help him?" It's, "How dangerous is this to my war?" That part matters because it tells you her primary lens is strategic, not humane. Once they rescue him, Peeta should, in theory, be allowed to just recover. Instead, you feel the pressure immediately. Plutarch and Coin start talking about him as a tool that's been damaged and maybe can be reforged. First he was Snow's weapon, now potentially he can be theirs. A living reminder of what the Capitol did, a symbol of unity and forgiveness if he can stand beside Katniss in a propo and say, "I believe in this rebellion." There is a lot to uncover here, because Peeta's trauma complicates the clean war story Coin wants to tell. He embodies the cost of violence, the risk that in fighting the games, you become a new game maker. He questions the bombing of the Nut. He hesitates about Coin's executions. Even in a hijacked, fragmented state, he keeps asking why. Why are we doing this? What happens after Snow? Plutarch, ever the producer, sees the value. A boy the Capitol broke who still chooses the rebellion? That's powerful. Coin sees the risk, a moral center she can't fully script? That's destabilizing. And here's the hook that carries us forward. When Katniss is at her most vengeful, her most exhausted, who keeps pulling her back from the edge Coin is already standing on? Is Peeta's damaged, stubborn moral compass the only thing stopping her from becoming Coin 2.0 once the Capitol falls? The moral line, are Peeta's manipulations more questionable than Katniss's arrows? So if Peeta's the one yanking Katniss back from becoming Coin 2.0, we have to ask something uncomfortable. Is his way actually cleaner? Or is the boy with the bread crossing a moral line that Katniss's arrows never do? Here's the real question. In a world built on televised pain, what's more ethically dangerous? Killing a handful of direct oppressors in combat, or manipulating the emotions of millions of people who will never know they were played? Katniss's rebellion is visceral. You see the arrow, you see the body. With Peeta, the casualties are hidden inside people's heads. This is where we talk about his greatest shots, and none of them involve a bow. The rooftop interview where he confesses his love for Katniss? At face value, it's a shy boy admitting a crush, but he times it perfectly, on live TV in a way that forces the games to reframe them as star-crossed lovers. The rule change, the gifts, the sympathy from the districts and the Capitol, all downstream of one emotional ambush. Then there's the pregnancy lie on the victory tour. Peeta stands there, hand in Katniss's, and casually drops a bomb that turns every future arena death into a potential child's death in the audience's imagination. He knows exactly what that will do to Capitol viewers who still want to see themselves as decent. He's not just surviving the games anymore. He's turning the games against the people who watch them. And those speeches, in Catching Fire and Mockingjay, the marriage proposal on stage, the quiet apologies, the broken broadcasts from the Capitol where he begs Katniss to stop the war. Each one is calibrated. Sometimes he's doing it consciously. Sometimes he's being used, but the effect is the same. He can swing whole districts from despair to hope to panic with a few sentences. There is a lot to uncover here about consent, about agency, about who's really holding the script. Now put that next to Katniss. Her violence is brutal, but it's legible. She kills in the arena to stay alive. She shoots the force field to break the quarter quell. She assassinates Coin in front of everyone because she refuses to let another Snow take power. You can argue with her choices, but you always know what she did and why. There's no illusion of safety, no soft focus promise. Peeta's power is softer and therefore slipperier. He doesn't just move bodies on a battlefield, he rearranges belief. That part matters because in a media-driven dictatorship, that's the only battlefield that really counts. Snow and Coin both understand this. That's why they fight over Peeta as a weapon more than they fight over any single victor with a bow. So are his methods justified because the Capitol started the psychological war? Or does the rebellion risk becoming the same games, just with a different host, when it leans on his talent for emotional engineering? We're going to cover that by asking a scarier what if. What happens to Panem? And to Katniss, if Peeta never said he loved Katniss? So let's run the nightmare scenario. Same reaping, same train, same fire costumes. But when Caesar asks Peeta if there's a special girl back home, he just smiles and dodges. No rooftop confession, no tragic crush on the girl from the seam, no star-crossed lovers angle for the audience to project onto. At face value, nothing in the arena has changed. But here's the real question. What happens when you rip the story out of the games? Without that confession, the Capitol never gets its perfect romance to package and sell. There is no incentive for the game makers to announce the two-victor rule change because there is no public fantasy of a doomed relationship to exploit. They can keep the games simple. 24 tributes enter, 1 victor leaves. The end. That part matters because the rule change isn't charity. It's a ratings grab built on Peeta's honesty. So walk through it. No rule change means no pivot from enemies to allies. Katniss still owes Peeta for the bread, sure, but there's no permission structure to turn that debt into a public partnership. Maybe they form a temporary alliance in the arena, the way tributes sometimes do. Maybe they don't. Either way, when the announcement never comes, there's no expectation they're allowed to both walk out. And the berries? Suddenly, they're not a romantic ultimatum. They're just a desperate stunt. 2 anonymous tributes threatening joint suicide is a glitch the Capitol can edit around, not a narrative crisis that exposes how fragile Snow's promise of a clear victor really is. Instead of a symbol of hope, it reads as a tantrum in a long line of bloody broadcasts. So does Katniss die? Or does she win alone? If the careers still hunt Peeta down early, Katniss never has the cave, never has the slow burn relationship the audience falls for, and never has a partner pushing her to perform tenderness as strategy. She becomes what the Capitol expects, a lethal, angry girl with a bow. Dangerous, yes, but controllable in the edit. If she survives as a lone victor, the Capitol can frame her as a cautionary tale rather than a romantic heroine. The spin writes itself. A volatile tribute from a rebellious district, traumatized by the games, but ultimately grateful to the Capitol for her new mansion and food for her people. Snow still fears her, but the districts don't see themselves in her the same way, because they never watched her choose berries for love. So what happens to the rebellion? Without the star-crossed lovers, you still have unrest. Rue's death, District 11's salute, Haymitch's quiet anger. But there is a lot to uncover here. Those sparks stay local. There's no shared story that every district child can retell in the same words. Pattern interrupt. Imagine your own version. Does Thresh become the symbol instead? Does Rue? Or does the fire just burn out in the arena, one more tragedy in a system built to absorb tragedy? This is where we talk about how much of Panem's fate hangs on one boy deciding, for once, not to be a piece in their games. Because if he never speaks up, the Capitol keeps the mic. If you had to pick one ally in a dystopia, Peeta or Katniss. So if the Capitol keeps the mic and the story never shifts, where does that leave you? Imagine you open your eyes tomorrow and you're in Panem. Not as a spectator, as a citizen under snow. Here's the real question. When the peacekeepers come down your street, do you want Katniss or Peeta standing next to you? At face value, Katniss feels like the obvious pick. You're thinking, give me the girl with the bow. She can hunt, she can track, she can keep you alive in the woods when the district mines shut down and the food shipments mysteriously get delayed. Katniss offers immediate protection. She'll put herself between you and the Capitol's gun without hesitating, which is both comforting and terrifying. But that part matters, because Katniss's rebellion is instinctive. Someone's hurt, she moves. Someone's starving, she trades, she hunts, she defies the fence. She's brilliant at short-term survival and those sudden explosive moments of courage the Capitol can't predict. Think of the berries. Think of her singing to Rue. None of that is planned as strategy. It becomes strategy after the fact, when the districts watch and something in them refuses to go back to sleep. Now put Peeta on the other side of you. No bow, no fire dress. Just the boy who can walk into a Capitol studio and make an entire audience forget they're cheering for child murder. There is a lot to uncover here. Peeta's power is social camouflage. In the 74th games, he literally paints himself into the arena to survive, then emotionally paints himself into the Capitol's heart. What does he offer you? He reads people. Fast. He can look at a crowd in your district square and know what story will make them lean in instead of look away. He understands the relationship between hope and fear in a way Snow would actually respect. He turns interviews, wedding specials, even a fake pregnancy into weapons. This is where we talk about using the Capitol's own tools against them instead of just trying to shoot through them. So which ally is more dangerous to your oppressors? It depends what you think the real war is. If you believe you're in for one sharp, bloody uprising, one night of fire, one shot at Snow, Katniss is the person you want sprinting toward the front line. She embodies the promise that someone from your district can stand up and hit back, even if the odds are impossible. But if you look at Panem and see a long psychological war of attrition, where the games never really stop, Peeta becomes the scarier choice for the Capitol. He's the one who makes sure the story of your resistance survives the crackdown. He keeps you human when the system is designed to turn you into a weapon or a warning. So hold that in your head, because in a minute, I'm going to ask you to actually choose Katniss or Peeta, and why. And yes, your answers might decide where we go in future episodes. Pattern break. Rapid fire Peeta facts you probably missed. So before you pick a side, let's do a speed run. You think you know Peeta. Let's test that. First rapid fire fact. In the 74th game's interviews, he's the only tribute who openly pushes against the Capitol's script. Everyone else sells a sob story or a strength. Peeta drops a live grenade. I want to show them they don't own me. At face value, it sounds romantic and philosophical. But here's the real question. Who is them in a room full of Capitol citizens and cameras? He's defining the relationship as captive versus captor on Caesar's stage, and no one can cut the feed without proving him right. Second hit, that love confession. Not just teenage drama, It forces the game makers to rewrite the rules of the games in real time. Two victors from the same district if both survive. That part matters because the capital's power rests on the rules being sacred. Peeta turns a talk show into a constitutional crisis. Who else in the arena rewires the system using nothing but words and timing? Now jump to Catching Fire. When the rebellion's inner circle is choosing who to save, multiple victors, Johanna, Beatty, Wyress, even Finnick, are prepared to die for Peeta, not Katniss. Why? We're going to cover their motives later, but here's the quick version. Katniss is the spark. Peeta is the promise. He can stand in a square, hand a child bread, and make an entire district believe there is a future after the capital. If you're planning a war, which one is harder to replace? Pattern break. Imagine a scoreboard in Plutarch's war room. Under assets, Peeta is never labeled rescued hostage. He's tagged as propaganda weapon. Coin talks about him the same way. This is where we talk about how terrifying that is. The new president of Panem and the former head game maker both see a baker's son as a missile you can aim at a population's emotions. First, the capital uses him as a mouthpiece against Katniss. Then District 13 wants to flip that signal and broadcast his recovery as proof that their system heals what Snow broke. And even when the hijacking is at its worst, he's still dangerous. To the capital, those fragmented warnings about incoming attacks on District 13, people survive because someone listens. His instincts for reading patterns, for noticing when the capital's story doesn't add up, are still firing underneath the trauma. There is a lot to uncover here, but the core reason he scares power is simple. Whether he's confessing love, begging for a ceasefire, or screaming that the bombs are coming, people believe him. So keep those rapid-fire facts in your head, because when you choose between Katniss and Peeta in a second, you're not just picking an archer or a baker, you're choosing which kind of weapon you think the capital feared more. Why Snow fears Katniss's symbol, but Peeta's words. So when you choose between Katniss and Peeta as the real weapon, you're actually stepping into Snow's problem, because he doesn't fear them in the same way. He doesn't even try to. Watch how he talks to Katniss on that snowy roof in Catching Fire. He doesn't debate her, he threatens her. He goes straight for her mother, for Prim, for Gale. His whole message is, stay in line, keep playing the star-crossed lover, don't let that symbol get away from you. At face value it sounds personal, but it's not. It's about optics. For Snow, Katniss is dangerous when she's visible, when she volunteers, when she sings to Rue, when she raises 3 fingers in District 11. He keeps circling back to the same fear. You are becoming something you can't control, a symbol the districts will project their own hope onto. And that part matters because symbols are hard to negotiate with. You can't sit a symbol down and offer it a deal. Now compare that to his treatment of Peeta. Snow never has a rooftop heart-to-heart with the baker's son. There is no protect your family bargain. Instead, once Peeta is in capital hands, Snow doesn't just silence him, he hijacks him. He turns Peeta into a broadcast. That's a completely different strategy. Here's the real question. Why does the same dictator who wants Katniss off screen as much as possible want Peeta on screen constantly? We're going to cover the logic, because there is a lot to uncover here. Katniss's danger is in what she does on camera. Peeta's danger is in what he says about what she does. She shoots an arrow at the force field. He's the one who can go on Caesar's show and explain what that means. Think about the 74th Games interview. Peeta is the only tribute who openly challenges the Capitol's script, turning a standard Q&A into a love story that forces a rule change. Later, on the victory tour, he escalates again. The proposal, the pregnancy, the barely veiled anger in District 11. He's not just reacting to events, He's framing them. He tells Panem what to feel about this girl on fire. In a media-saturated dictatorship, that's lethal. This is where we talk about control. The capital can flood every district with footage, but the real power sits with whoever narrates that footage. Controlling the protagonist is useful. Controlling the narrator is essential. That's the reason Snow invests so much in breaking Peeta, in rewiring his memories until the boy who once humanized Katniss now calls her a mutt. But here's the twist Snow doesn't plan for. Even after the torture, even after the real or not real terror, Peeta survives. He recovers enough to start telling a new story about her again. And if the most carefully engineered mouthpiece in Panem slips the leash, what does that say about the capital's whole strategy? Surviving the unsurvivable, Peeta as proof the game's failed. So if Peeta slips the leash, what actually breaks? Not just Snow's media plan, the entire purpose of the Hunger Games. At face value, the games are punishment. You rebel, you lose your children. Simple. But here's the real question. Why turn that punishment into an annual spectacle? A tradition your entire district plans around. The reason is psychological. The games are designed to make violence normal, to make despair routine, and to convince everyone that resistance only ends one way. You're not just supposed to die in the arena. You're supposed to die on the inside first. This is where we talk about Peeta as a failure of that system. By all accounts, he should be the capital's perfect cautionary tale. Starving kid from the seam-adjacent bakery, beaten by his mother, forced into an arena, then into a second arena, then into torture and hijacking. That part matters because the capital keeps raising the stakes. If they can break the boy who once threw bread to a stranger in the rain, what hope do you have? Except he doesn't break the way they need. He bends, he fractures, he almost kills Katniss. But somehow after all of that, he still ends up choosing love, family, and these tiny, stubborn acts of kindness. Planting primroses, baking bread, helping other traumatized victors in District 12 find some kind of routine. The games promise that once they've had their turn with you, you'll never be whole again. Peeta's existence quietly says, real or not real, you don't get the final word on me. Why is that politically dangerous? Because the capital's power rests on defining what survival looks like. You live, but on their terms. You win, but as their victor. Your trauma is their property. A survivor who refuses that script, who insists on a self that isn't just pain and obedience, is proof that the games failed at their core purpose. He turns survival into a form of resistance. And that resistance doesn't stay private. It shapes Katniss. Remember, her default setting is fight or flight. She survives the games by hunting, by shooting, by burning the system down. Peeta survives by refusing to hate more than he has to. During Coin's proposed final symbolic Hunger Games for capital children, you can feel the tension. Katniss is standing on the edge of repeating Snow's cycle. Peeta is one of the few voices saying, essentially, why are we rebuilding the same arena? His entire relationship with violence pulls her back from becoming exactly what the games were built to create. Pattern interrupt. Now contrast him with other victors. Johanna, stripped of everything she loves, left raw and furious. Annie, shattered and drifting. Haymitch, preserved only by alcohol and sarcasm. Their trajectories are understandable, and that's the point. The system expects those outcomes. Peeta's arc is the outlier. There is a lot to uncover here, but the headline is simple. In a world engineered to turn survivors into weapons or warnings, he somehow becomes neither. He becomes proof that the games can wound you, hijack you, use you on every screen in Panem, and still fail to own who you decide to be after. So if one boy can slip that net, What happens when an entire district starts to believe they can too? The quiet revolution. Peeta's danger isn't loud, it's contagious. And this is where the capital's real nightmare starts. Because one person slipping the net is a problem, but one person teaching other people how to slip it too, that's a quiet revolution. Peeta doesn't storm a barricade, he walks into a room, and slowly the emotional gravity tilts toward him. You watch it with Katniss first. At face value, she's the fighter, the hunter, the one who can actually win the games. But who is it that gets her to promise she'll try to stay herself? Who keeps insisting their relationship isn't just a strategy? Even when that would be easier, Peeta keeps forcing her to see that survival without a soul isn't victory. It's just a slower kind of death. That part matters because it changes her choices. She sings to Rue, she volunteers for Prim again, she risks herself for Peeta in the Quarterquell. Underneath the arrows and explosions, you can trace this steady line back to one baker's son who decided the real question wasn't, how do I live? But who do I become while I'm living? And it's not just Katniss. Look at Haymitch. Here's a man the capital has already broken. A victor whose whole personality is weaponized apathy. So why is he the one screaming that they have to keep Peeta alive at all costs? Why does this bitter drunk start running a multi-year conspiracy just to protect the boy with the bread? Peeta pulls him out of his self-imposed exile, not by lecturing him, but by consistently treating him as someone worth believing in. Even the other victors bend around him. Johanna, who hates everyone on principle, still risks herself to get Peeta out of the arena. Finnick, who understands how the capital uses beauty and charm, recognizes a different version of that power in Peeta and decides he's worth dying for. There is a lot to uncover here, but the pattern is simple. People who have every reason to trust No one end up reorganizing their loyalties around him. Here's the real question. Why is that more dangerous than a girl with a bow? Because Peeta's rebellion is relational. Totalitarian systems run on isolation. They need every district, every victor, every family to believe that connection is a liability. Peeta keeps proving the opposite. He allies himself with Rue's memory on live TV, turns a dead child into a shared wound between districts instead of a private trauma. He shows empathy for other tributes, even the ones trying to kill him. He refuses to abandon Katniss when it would be strategically smarter to let her die and win alone. You can censor a symbol. You can kill a mockingjay. But how do you erase the way people start treating each other after someone like Peeta has been in the room? That's the quiet revolution, the part that keeps going when the cameras shut off, when the games end, when the capital falls. In the next section, we're going to cover how all these threads, his words, his relationships, his choices, add up to one answer. Why Peeta Mellark was, from the capital's point of view, more dangerous than Katniss ever was. So, was Peeta really more dangerous than Katniss? So here's where we finally answer the question the capital never wanted anyone to ask out loud. Between the girl on fire and the boy with the bread, who was actually more dangerous? At face value, it feels obvious. Katniss blows up arenas, shoots down hovercrafts, and literally kills a president. She's the visible spark, the image on the posters, the reason a district kid can point to a screen and say, "There, that's hope." Without her, there is no mockingjay, no symbol to rally around, no flaming dress for Cinna to weaponize. That part matters because Peeta can't narrate a rebellion that doesn't exist yet. But here's the real question. Once that spark is lit, what keeps it from burning everything down? This is where we talk about Peeta as oxygen. His danger profile isn't about spectacle, it's philosophical, narrative, emotional, and moral all at once. Philosophically, he's the only tribute who walks into the game saying, "I don't want them to change me." In a system built on obedience, refusing to be a piece is more subversive than shooting an arrow at a pig. Narratively, he hijacks the story of the games in real time. The love confession forces the rule change. The berries force the capital to choose between two nightmares: public romantic tragedy or open defiance. On the victory tour, he keeps escalating the script, proposing on live TV, inventing the pregnancy, until Snow's carefully balanced promise of safety for victors collapses. In a world where control is maintained through story and spectacle, the person who can rewrite the script is the one you really have to fear. Emotionally, Peeta weaponizes charisma. He makes the capital adore him, then slowly turns that affection against Snow. He makes Katniss believable as a symbol because he sells her to the audience, to the districts, even to other victors. Remember, in Catching Fire, multiple victors agree to die for him instead of her. Why? Because they understand the long game. You can replace a face. You can't easily replace a storyteller who can move every district at once. And morally, he's dangerous because he refuses to hate. Even hijacked, when his memories are shattered, his core instinct is still to protect people, to pull back from Coin's more ruthless tactics, to question revenge. The capital runs on dehumanization. Peeta's whole presence is an argument that you can go through hell and not come out a monster. That's a problem for any regime built on fear. So was Peeta really more dangerous than Katniss? From the capital's point of view, yes, because Katniss breaks arenas, but Peeta breaks narratives. And once a story stops working, the whole system follows. But before we lock that in as our final answer, sit with it. Do you buy that the one who controls the story is more dangerous than the one who fires the arrow? Or do you think we're underestimating what a single impossible act of defiance can do? Hold that question, because next we're going to cover the one moment that might completely flip this reading on its head. Your turn in the arena. Peeta or Katniss? Who's the real threat? So let's put you in the arena for a second. Not as a tribute, but as a strategist. After everything we've pulled apart about Peeta's words and Katniss's arrows, here's the real question. If you're Snow, who keeps you up at night? Is it the girl on fire who can turn a single act of defiance into a district-wide symbol? Or the boy with the bread who can quietly rewrite the story the capital tells about itself? I want you to actually pick a side here. Who was the capital's true worst nightmare in these games of control and propaganda? Katniss, Peeta, or someone else entirely? Maybe you think Haymitch is the real threat because he understands the rules well enough to break them from the inside. Maybe you'd vote for Snow or Coin because the most dangerous person is the one willing to burn children to keep their power. Your answer says a lot about what you think power really is in Panem. Now bring it closer to home. If you woke up tomorrow in a real dystopia, Tesserae, peacekeepers, the whole thing, whose skill set are you hoping you ended up with? Katniss's ability to shoot, track, and survive in the woods, or Peeta's charisma, strategic thinking, and refusal to be a piece in their games? At face value, archery feels safer. You can hunt, you can fight. But that part matters because the capital doesn't lose sleep over one more good hunter. It loses sleep over someone who can turn a wedding dress into a revolution on live television. Drop your answer in the comments, Peeta or Katniss, and tell me why. Would you rather be the visible spark that everyone rallies around, or the person in the background negotiating alliances, reading the room, and twisting the narrative until the capital's promises start to sound hollow? There is a lot to uncover here about what kind of danger actually changes systems versus what just survives inside them. And since this is where we talk about data as well as drama, I've pinned a poll on the channel. Who do you think is objectively more dangerous to the capital's control? Peeta, Katniss, Haymitch, Snow, or Coin? Go vote there after this, because we're going to cover the results in a future breakdown and see whether this community leans toward the bow, the bread, or the mastermind in the shadows. If you're into this kind of deep dive into character psychology, political design, and why the relationship between victors and the capital works the way it does, you're exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the follow-up on that poll and the rest of this Hunger Games series, because we're not done. To close this video, we're going to step outside Panem for one last thought on why a story about a boy who bakes and refuses to play along might be more dangerous in our world than any flaming arrow could ever be. Why Peeta matters outside of Panem. So here's where Peeta stops being just a character and starts feeling uncomfortably close to real life. Because when you strip away the arena, what is his actual power? It's not strength, it's not weapons, it's that he can walk into a room, read the temperature, and quietly rewrite the story everyone thinks they're in. And here's the real question. Who does that in our world? We're not living under the capital, but we are swimming in narratives. News feeds, comment sections, political speeches, brand campaigns, the way your workplace spins a bad decision. At face value, they're just words, just content, just vibes. But there is a lot to uncover here, because the people who frame what's normal, what's acceptable, what's hopeless, they can be more dangerous to an unjust system than the person who just breaks a rule in public. That's Peeta's whole deal. He doesn't storm the game maker's tower. He tells a story on Caesar's couch that makes it impossible for the games to stay what they were. The love confession, the star-crossed lovers, the berries. Each move forces the capital to adjust its own script, and every adjustment exposes how rigged the games are. That part matters because it's the same pattern you see when a journalist exposes corruption, or an artist refuses the approved version of history, or a small creator refuses to parrot the trending take. So what does not being a piece in their games look like when you're not being chased by mutts? Honestly, it's weirdly small. It's telling the truth in a meeting when it would be easier to stay quiet. It's refusing to join in when a group dehumanizes someone from a different district in your world. Another class, another country, another algorithm bubble. It's choosing not to share the outrage bait clip that turns real people into props. This is where we talk about accessibility. Most of us will never be Katniss. We're not going to pull off a perfect revolution shot on live TV. But Peeta's kind of danger, that's available. You have conversations, you have whatever platform you have, even if it's just 3 friends in a group chat. You have a relationship to power every time you decide whether to repeat a cruel joke, whether to humanize someone you're told is the enemy, whether to treat the person in front of you as a piece or a person. So where do you see Peeta energy around you? The co-worker who keeps redirecting credit to the team, the student who asks the uncomfortable question about a neutral history lesson, the nurse who treats every patient with dignity in a system that rewards speed over care. None of them are shooting arrows. All of them are quietly refusing the script that says some lives matter less. And when enough people do that, stories crack. The capital doesn't fall only because one girl shot an arrow at a force field. It falls because, over time, too many people stopped believing the story that justified its power. Peeta's danger is that he helps you stop believing, and once you stop, the games can't work the way they used to. In the next section, we're going to cover how that same narrative power makes him terrifying even when he's hijacked, and why a broken Peeta is still one of the most dangerous victors Panem ever produced. Final thanks and what's coming next in Victor's Village. So if Peeta can still be dangerous, even when he's broken, what does that mean for you, sitting here at the end of this breakdown? Still thinking about a boy with bread and a pocket full of words? First, thank you for staying through this entire long-form dive into Peeta's relationship with power, propaganda, and the politics of Panem. Most people stop at "he's the nice one" and move on. You stayed through the hijacking, the interviews, the games, and the quiet moments in Victor's village where the real damage shows. That part matters because it proves you're not just watching the Hunger Games, you're interrogating why the system works at all. And that's exactly what this channel is for. This is the Victor's Village of YouTube. On the surface, it's a reward. Cozy deep dives, familiar characters, a district's worth of theories. But here's the real question. What happens when we stop taking the Capital's story at face value and start asking why victors, villains, mentors, and rebels all keep orbiting the same broken promise of hope? Around here, we're going to cover the people Panem turns into symbols and then forgets how to treat as humans. So if you've ever wondered where Katniss Everdeen ends and the Mockingjay begins, we're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode. Katniss as symbol versus person, and why the Capital and District 13 both need her to be one and not the other. We're also heading straight into Haymitch's secret war. You see the drunk in the Victor's village. The Capital sees a liability. But the rebellion, they see the only mentor who's been playing a multi-decade game against the arena itself. There is a lot to uncover here. His first quarter quell, his relationship with Snow's punishments, and why so many of his tributes were never meant to come home. After that, this is where we talk about hijacking as psychological warfare. Not just Peeta got tortured, but why the Capital chose Trackerjacker venom, how memory becomes another arena, and what it means to weaponize love until you can't trust your own mind. If you thought the berries were dangerous, wait until we map out how a single altered memory can destabilize an entire district. If you want more context on how all of this fits into Panem's political design, check out the Hunger Games playlist on this channel. You'll find our deep dives on Victor's Village as a tool of control, the way Tesserae rigged the class system, and how each district's industry shapes who survives the reaping and why. And if you want to keep exploring the games long after the arena lights go out, make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell, and signal to the algorithm that you want to come back to Victor's Village. Because the Capital may end the broadcast. We don't have to stop watching. One last question. Are you a piece or a player? We don't have to stop watching. But here's the real question. All episode, we've been talking about Peeta as the quiet strategic threat, the victor who understands that the real games aren't fought with arrows, they're fought with stories. And all of that circles back to a single rooftop conversation, years before the Mockingjay ever spreads her wings. Peeta looking up at the sky and saying he doesn't want to be a piece in their games. At face value, that sounds almost naive. You're a kid from a poor district heading into a death arena run by the most powerful capital in the world. Of course you're a piece. That's the whole design. But that part matters because Peeta isn't talking about whether he dies. He's talking about who gets to define what his life meant, the relationship between his choices and their narrative. So here's the real question for us. Where do you already feel like a piece in someone else's game? Is it the performance you keep up at work because the algorithm of office politics rewards obedience over honesty? Is it the way social media turns your attention into a product, nudging you toward outrage because that keeps you scrolling? Is it the way politics offers you two scripts to read from and calls that hope? Peeta's answer isn't to blow up the arena himself. His rebellion is almost embarrassingly small, at least on the surface. Tell the truth in an interview. Refuse to sell a fake romance as pure propaganda. Turn a handful of berries into a question the Capital can't spin away. There is a lot to uncover here, but this is where we talk about scale. The reason he's dangerous isn't that he can overthrow Snow alone, it's that he can make millions of people see the board. That's media literacy as rebellion. Not just consuming stories, but asking why this angle, why this edit, why this promise of safety if you just play along. In Panem, That means realizing Victor's village is a cage with better furniture. In our world, it might mean noticing when a news segment turns suffering into spectacle, or when a franchise sells you war as entertainment and then tells you to go back to work. Because once you see the story, you can start to rewrite your role in it. You can choose when to play along and when to jam the system, even in tiny, almost invisible ways. A conversation you refuse to let slide, a narrative you refuse to repost, a script you quietly, stubbornly don't read from. And that's the final thing Peeta teaches us. The most dangerous people to unjust systems aren't always the ones carrying weapons. They're the ones who refuse to let anyone else decide what their life means. So the arena lights go down, the broadcast cuts. The Capitol thinks the show is over. But are you walking away as a piece or as a player? And what happens to their games when enough players start saying no?